Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Dodgers Dawgs as part of the Dodgers Daily Network. My name is Austin Brubaker. I will be your host this evening, and I actually want to read this off because I think this is actually a great intro to this. We have the chat rolling in right now. Gregory just sent in a chat right now. I timed this just right. I just walked into the house and sitting down, started looking for something to watch on the internet, and bam! There's Dodgers Daily getting ready to start. That is exactly right. We are here live, Dodgers Dawgs, as part of the Dodgers Daily Network in a very fascinating time across Major League Baseball. Obviously, right now is the start of the Major League, or really close to the end of the Major League Baseball trade deadline season. And you're starting to see some of these moves start to roll in. We saw the New York Yankees make a couple of moves for a couple of third base options for a Ryan McMahon and an Ahmed Rosario. Hint, the Dodgers are not going to be trading for Ahmed Rosario this year. Just today, the Tigers decided to trade for Chris Paddock. So that brings up the question, especially with the recent struggles for the Dodgers, which it is no secret that the Dodgers have in the month of July, particularly since Max Muncy has been down with an injury, been in a funk as a team. They have not looked like the defending World Series champions, and many of the players during this past month have struggled quite a bit. What do the Dodgers need to do in order to make this team as good as it possibly can going into the World Series? Or what moves should or shouldn't they do? We'll be looking at a little bit more of a pragmatic look, as this is a little bit more of a continuation of a conversation that Casey and I had on Wednesday. So if you did not get a chance to watch the live show on Wednesday, Casey and I went back and forth in what was a bit of a spirited debate, as much as Casey and I go into a debate with each other, talking particularly about the need to go out and pay for the top reliever on the market. And I this show won't be solely focused on that, because I want to make sure that this is your guys' show as well, nor is this a repudiation of Casey or any of your guys' opinion at all. Every opinion, I believe, is fair and probably has a place to be heard. But I also want to continue to perspect my point of view and what perhaps could be the view of the Los Angeles Dodgers, as we're seeing some of these, as we had talked about on Wednesday, elite starting or relief pitching options, especially the ones with years of control, starts to naturally come off the market. And what I mean by that is Felix Bautista of the Baltimore Orioles is now injured right now. I don't know necessarily the extent of that injury, but I'm sure with him having several years of club control along the way, that probably is going to scare off teams that would be looking for a pitcher like him to pitch into the postseason. And then obviously today with the news of Emmanuel Clase, which if you have not heard the news of Emmanuel Clase, he is on paid leave right now by Major League Baseball as they're undergoing some sort of investigating with potential relation to sports betting. We're not going to get into conversations about that, particularly because the investigation has not concluded at all, so I don't think it's fair for him or any sort of party to be making too many comments about that. All I will note is that is not an option for the Los Angeles Dodgers right now, which means that the limitation for some of the years of control, top of the line relief pitchers might be starting to dwindle down, and perhaps that might have been something that naturally the Los Angeles Dodgers weren't going to go in that market anyway. And I think what we need to make sure that we do as we enter into the trade deadline, that is a couple of days away, acknowledge the things that the Dodgers are struggling with, and then find pragmatic good solutions or good options that the Dodgers could target going forward, because I think going with this pragmatic approach, I think is something that has separated the Dodgers as an organization from many other organizations doing things smart and responsible, yet not being afraid to make actions, which I think can be reflected by a lot of the moves and a lot of decisions that have been made from the organization. And I ultimately want to embody what the organization's thought process is, while adding a little bit of additional element of one of my thoughts are presenting kind of that opinion to you guys, and then have some back and forth where there could be disagreement. But I want this show, make sure that this show is for you guys, and to do that, one of the things that I have brought up quite a bit, and I don't know if I can pin this to the actual top of the chat. I might go ahead and do that. I don't think I've ever pinned a message before. Yeah, the message should be pinned right now. So what I've done quite a bit when I've done these shows is I've actually done a lot of homework with this, which is in part why I wanted to argue for not necessarily using all of your all of your prospects in order to get one top reliever, because I know that there are quite a bit of options, which some of those options are coming off the board right now. But what I have attached is actually the link to the spreadsheet that I have used for a lot of this analysis. It includes 4 different tabs. It includes pitchers, which includes starting pitchers, right-handed pitchers, and left-handed pitchers, as well as the 5 main relief options. We can go ahead and take a look at that in just a minute, as well as some hitters, some players within the organization situationally wise that you might want to take note of, as particularly guys that are coming up for Rule 5 draft, or guys that are going to be perhaps minor league free agents going forward. And then also with that spreadsheet has the Dodgers 2025 pitching results. And I've shown that quite a bit. It's one that I update pretty regularly because I want to take a look to see, okay, with all the pitching options that they have, we know the overall results for the Dodgers not been good. They're like 23rd in Major League Baseball in ERA this season. But what is the options for the actual postseason options that you want to potentially rely upon? All of those are available, and in fact, let me go ahead and see if I can cut over to that. I'll actually show you this, show you my copy. The link for this should be in the pinned to the comment or in the description of the video. Let me see if I can go ahead and put this over right here. Yeah, so you should have access to this. This is something we've used quite a bit. This is the pitching options. It has a lot of different numbers, including ERA estimators, which you can find up here. The ability to get swing and miss, all different statistics for that, as well as contact quality. How well do hitters actually make contact on each one of these guys? So you have starting pitchers, which we'll go into in just a minute. I don't really see that as a need for the Dodgers right now, nor is there really any options that are standing out at all right now. You do have some relief pitching options. These are right-handed relievers. This is the market that I would anticipate the Dodgers to look at heavily in. You also have left-handed relievers, as well as, and this is what I had mentioned, the 5 main guys that have been brought up a lot as far as the high leverage relief arms for potentially being options for the Dodgers. And then when we're talking about trade deadline hitters, the top one is third baseman. This is especially when the when Max Muncy went down and it looked like the Dodgers might need to add a third baseman. These are the potential options. There really isn't any great options for there. You have outfielders, particularly corner outfielders right here, as well as pure center fielders. And then one name that got brought up, we'll actually mention him in just a little bit. But for these, we have the actual results in the 2025 season, the expected statistics, the splits, the ability to generate power, their discipline, defense, as well as their speed. How fast are they actually measured by sprint speed? And then we have 2026 Major League Baseball MiLB situations. This is what could potentially be happening down the line for many players within the organization, as well as for every player within the Dodgers organization that has pitched a game this year. what is their statistics actually look like? And you look at down at the bottom, ideal postseason options, which are outlined in blue. These are minor league depth options that the Dodgers have, as well as potential designatable arms is kind of how I'm defining them. Additional arms that are needed throughout the course of the year. What are the statistics for each one of these guys? So, for example, 4.26 ERA estimated this season for the Dodgers. It's a little bit different from the ideal postseason options, 3.68, which in a totally unfair situation where you're not removing the other options for other organizations, that would rank the Dodgers 7th in baseball. So it's a little bit of a better situation than what the Dodgers potentially are in. But really, these first two spreadsheets right here are going to be the ones that we're going to be talking about quite a bit, because we're going to be talking a lot about the trade deadline today. So I want to make sure that you have that. You have the ability to be able to explore that and get your thoughts on that and anything trade deadline related today. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to go ahead and go into the comments section. CNAV, thank you very much for joining us. Good afternoon, Austin. I have a few players I'd like you to cover today. Ryan O'Hearn, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and a comparison between Mason Miller versus Ryan Helsley. I'd really appreciate that. Yeah, so with that, for Ryan O'Hearn, I actually haven't had them on my list. And one, this spreadsheet takes a lot of time to be able to manually put together and actually get all of these results, and it is manually updated because I don't have access to resources to automatically pull that information. But with Ryan O'Hearn, the biggest thing to note about him, and the reason why he's not really a great fit for the Dodgers organization, you look at the percentage of games that he plays this year. I believe it's 76 games, I think is what I counted before the show today, that are either at first base or designated hitter. There are a handful of games that he has in right field and left field. It's probably maybe 15 or so in right field, maybe 20 combined between right field and left field. He has not played there quite a bit. And when he has played there, at least by defensive run saves, I think he was at a -3 during the 15 or so games that he had in right field, which defensive run saves is a cumulative statistic, which means the more that you play there, the more you have the opportunity to be able to gain or subtract defensive runs, which means that if you're not playing a lot and you're already at -3, that's probably is indicative, especially with the way that Baltimore has utilized him, that it probably would not be a great defender out there. And with that, you would have a defensive alignment of Teoscar Hernandez either in right or left, Ryan O'Hearn in the other corner, both of them not being great defenders, and then potentially Andy Pages in center field, which he has made a lot of improvements on, but I think there's still times of question marks with Andy Pages in center field. I'm not going to bash on Andy Pages in center field a whole lot, but I think that would be a really questionable defensive alignment if that was the case. One that I think is a little bit more realistic of an option for the Los Angeles Dodgers, in part because position-wise, I think it fits significantly better, and we'll go ahead and each time you guys bring up a name that I have on here, we'll go ahead and cut over to this, is Sir Anthony Dominguez. And so what we're going to do, I'm actually going to zoom in on this really quick. So Sir Anthony Dominguez, 1-year club control, which for $8 million. He's one that's almost certainly going to be traded at this trade deadline. Thing to know about him, 3.24 ERA on the season, exact same as the expected ERA. Other estimators are really around the same ballpark for him. Biggest thing about Sir Anthony Dominguez is he generates a lot of swing and miss. His whiff percentage is 34.3%. Strikeout percentage is about 31%. He's now transitioned, now that Felix Bautista is out, into more of that closer type role. Otherwise, he's a late innings guy. Biggest downside with Sir Anthony Dominguez that could drive you a little bit away from his profile is he does walk a lot of hitters. His walk percentage right now is at 13.7%. I will take note that that has not scared away the Dodgers in the past, especially with the way that they develop guys. You look at up and down the Dodgers organization, there's a lot of guys that generate a lot of swing and miss, but struggle with command. I think Sir Anthony Dominguez fits a little bit with that profile, at least with the swing and miss ability that the Dodgers typically like to target. Gets a decent amount of swing and miss, 14.3% swing to strike percentage, 98 basically for the velo, and then the batted ball quality is really, really solid for Sir Anthony Dominguez. He would be, if you're looking for a right-handed option out of the bullpen that the Dodgers could target, towards the top of the list of guys that I would potentially be interested in, especially when you compare the price point of what it's going to cost to get him with the effective value that you're going to get from a guy like Sir Anthony Dominguez. You combine that with his ability in the past, he's had postseason experience and postseason success as well. I believe he has an ERA of in the ones or low twos in his postseason experience as well. He very well could be an option. And then you talked about a comparison between Mason Miller and Ryan Helsley. Both of them are on different options on the graph, but I would encourage you to take a look at that. For this season, which this season has been a little bit more of a down season for Ryan Helsley, which means that his numbers in past years are perhaps even better, and he's been one of the most consistent relief arms out there as far as a right-handed relief option closer. Remember, Ryan Helsley and Mason Miller, both closers. Ryan Helsley, 1 year of control left, meaning he's going to be a free agent after this year. And St. Louis is 1 game above 500. I believe they lost 2 out of 3 to San Diego after losing 2 out of 3 to Colorado. They're kind of falling a little bit out of this and in a little bit of limbo of what they're going to do. This year, Ryan Helsley has put up a 3.00 ERA compared to Mason Miller, who has put up a 3.76. Now, Mason Miller has really good underlying numbers as well, a 2.46 Sierra being skill-induced ERA. That is an ERA estimator that is better predictive of future success. Ryan Helsley's is at 3.30. When you're talking about swing and miss ability, Ryan Helsley's got a strikeout percentage of 26%. Mason Miller is ridiculous with a 39.1% strikeout percentage, but Mason Miller walks 12% of the hitters that he faces, generates a ridiculous amount of swing and miss. So if you're looking for just pure swing and miss stuff, Mason Miller is the better pitcher. Ryan Helsley has had better results. Mason Miller has better pure stuff than a Ryan Helsley, although both of them can throw absolute gas. Mason Miller, 101 on his fastball, Helsley, 99. Both of them really good options. The difference between them is Miller has several years of team control. He's got 5 more years of team control, I believe, including this year. He's making the league minimum, which means that the Athletics can be extraordinarily patient with a guy like a Miller. And the price point in order to get a guy like Mason Miller would be astronomically high. As opposed to, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, a guy like a Ryan Helsley, he would not cost as much because he is a pure rental. And pure rentals, or guys that have maybe a year and a half left of club control, meaning this year and then next year you'll have them as well, significantly cheaper than if you have a guy that has 2+ years of team control. And other organizations very much know that. And so when you're talking about the comparison between them, results-wise, as far as this season, Helsley, a little bit better ERA, but not quite as much swing and miss, although I think it's been a little bit better, and he generates a lot of chase, Helsley does, 34% chase percentage, and that's very comparable to Mason Miller's 35.5% chase percentage. So both very comparable, very good options at the back end of the bullpen. So then it's a comparison of what is the best in terms of meeting the cost and being cost effective and pragmatic in those situations. Thank you very much for that comparison, and really good comparison between the two. Gibson88, thank you very much for joining us. CNAV, and this is a conversation for you guys, chat. What do you think about Joe Kelly throwing a bullpen in front of the Dodgers? I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts about Joe Kelly throwing a bullpen. I think it could potentially be an emergency option if injuries continue to pile up. But if we're looking at Joe Kelly, and let's remember who Joe Kelly was last season, because I think that is probably the best predictor of what's going forward because he's not getting any younger. He's 37, I believe, right now, or would be, yeah, he's 37 right now. Last year put up a 4.78 ERA, a 5.11 expected ERA. The FIP and XFIP were about 4.5, 4.22 for the XFIP. Sierra was 3.87. The strikeouts have gone down from where they were. A couple of years ago, actually in 2023, the expected numbers were really, really solid for Joe Kelly. Just wasn't quite completely there. So as an emergency depth option, or if it's something where he absolutely shows out, I'm not completely opposed to that. But if this is the solution to what the Dodgers need out of the bullpen, I don't think that Joe Kelly is going to answer all of the problems that the Dodgers have been experiencing recently. And this is what Casey and I talked about. Even though I'm against them going out and spending their top prospects for the top level line relief pitcher, meaning I don't want the Dodgers to trade their top prospects to get a Yohan Duran or Griffin Jax or a Mason Miller. That doesn't mean that I don't think that the Dodgers need relief pitching help, and in fact, I do think the Dodgers need relief pitching help. I think there are better options that are better for the Dodgers, or perhaps you could make an argument that it's not better for the Dodgers in 2025, but if you take the long-term look of things, I think it would be better, smarter decisions that the Dodgers could make for that. And that's with Joe Kelly. I don't think he's the exact solution to all of the issues that the Dodgers are dealing with. Oh, Donnie Boy, thank you very much for dealing with us. How do we set up the team to best handle DSCS contenders? Most likely the Cubs, Brewers, and Mets. That's what some most care about. Absolutely. That is the conversation that the Dodgers have. And I think potentially adding a relief pitcher or two could be something that really helps add a ton of firepower, especially if Tanner Scott is actually going to be coming back. When you add in a Blake Trinan to this bullpen, which Blake Trinan is back with the Los Angeles Dodgers. He was activated before the game on Sunday. Same with Justin Robleski. You have starting to have quite a bit of firepower. Adding another guy or two to make the bullpen completely dominant or have a lot of different options that you could throw out there, I think is going to really help set up the Dodgers well. And then it comes down to your key players that you paid to actually perform, actually go out there and performing. Mookie Betts has been struggling quite a bit. We've seen Freddie Freeman go through long stretches of struggle over the past month or so. Hopefully he's finding his way out of it. Teoscar Hernandez has dealt with some struggles. Tommy Edman has been in a long funk right now and has struggled since coming back from injury. There's been a lot of players, and I don't want to just identify those players. Obviously, there are other players that have struggled as well, but those are key contributors to making this offense be clicking on all cylinders. Those players have to be able to perform in order to make this team good. One of the rumors, and we'll actually talk about this right now, because Casey and I actually didn't have a chance to go into the outfield market. So when we were talking about actual solutions or potential solutions that the Dodgers could have to the outfield situation, which, to be fair, Michael Conforto had a great game on Sunday. It was really, really good, and if you look at his numbers over the month of July, he actually is a well above league average hitter in the month of July, in major part to the game that he had yesterday. In fact, I'll pull up the numbers in just a second, and we'll take a look at the numbers in July. Because I think this is something just to keep in mind, and this is not going to be a full segment on the Dodgers should keep Michael Conforto in an everyday type of role, or should keep Michael Conforto in general. But if we're looking strictly at the numbers in July, because of the game yesterday, Michael Conforto entering the game yesterday had a 91 WRC plus in the month of July. One game where you have a couple of doubles and a home run and you start to hit really well, already up in the month of July, and this is the difficulty of small sample sizes, has a 133 WRC plus in July. He's hitting 276, 323, 517 with a 133 WRC plus in the month of July. This is not season wide. If you look at the overall season totals for a Michael Conforto, he's still below league average bat. I believe it's an 487 WRC plus on the season. And that's with the game that he had yesterday, which was really, really good. When we're talking about the outfield, and this is especially evident right now, they do have Esteury Ruiz and James Outman with the couple of injuries that they have to the roster, and with the struggles that the Dodgers have clearly been experiencing with Michael Conforto quite a bit this season. It can be very much reasoned with why the Dodgers would want to go out there and potentially target some sort of outfield bat. So there actually has been a couple of different options that have been presented. One will actually save because I have some comments about that, and actually I want to talk about a chat that I had in the YouTube chat actually a couple of days ago before the news broke with Brendan Donovan. But one of the names that has been mentioned quite a bit is named by the guy by the name of Harrison Bader. Harrison Bader, if you're not familiar, outfielder in Minnesota, 1 year left on his deal, been traveling along to a lot of different organizations. And this comes into question of what exactly are the Dodgers if they were to target some sort of outfield bat. And I think, if I had to guess, based on the play that Tommy Edman has had at third base, being able to cover that and having several different options, including Alex Freeland down at the minor league level on the infield, I think the potential position that they could target is some sort of outfield bat. The question for you as a fan is, what is the bigger need for the Dodgers? Do they need to find a bat, or do they need to find somebody that makes the defense better? Because I think if you were to try to answer that question, if your primary concern is about improving the defense, then Harrison Bader would be the absolute perfect fit. Harrison Bader, throughout his career, has been a phenomenal defensive player, and he has a lot of experience playing well above league average defense in center field. Which means that if you were to acquire Harrison Bader and play him, whether this is on a full-time or part-time basis, the plan would be for Harrison Bader to man center field, most likely, which means that you can move Andy Pages into one of the corners, ideally right field with Teoscar Hernandez moving to left. That means that you have a Tommy Edman potentially be an option at second base when Max Muncy returns, which means Tommy Edman is playing his best defensive position. And I think with some of the struggles that Ha-Seong Kim has been having recently over the past couple of months, I don't know how much the Dodgers, and it could be in part because of the injuries that he has sustained with. He's been dealing with a little bit with, I believe it's stuff with his shoulder. But I think with Tommy Edman, his best position is probably the second base position, which means that you would be upgrading center field defensively, you'd be upgrading right field defensively, and in this situation, it would be potentially something where if Michael Conforto continues to move along and hit, perhaps it's a platoon of Harrison Bader and Michael Conforto in the outfield that you could make work. And then you would have your infield being Muncy, Betts at shortstop, which Mookie Betts defensively has not been an issue this year. It's the offense that's been causing him to struggle. And in fact, he's been above league average defensively. Up the middle defense would get significantly better if that is the case. And especially when you're getting a lot of pitchers back, some of those small margins could be something that the Dodgers target. And remember last year, the Dodgers went out and specifically addressed a defensive first center fielder in Kevin Kiermaier. Could Harrison Bader be that next option, perhaps with a little bit more upside with his bat? Now, the results for Harrison Bader this year have actually been pretty solid, and what we're going to do is we're going to split. We're going to cut this over to right here and look at Harrison Bader and his numbers. He's been batting .255. We'll go ahead and make this full screen. He's been batting .255 on the season, .336 on base percentage, .441 slugging. That's a 118 WRC plus on the season. Now, I'm going to tell this straight out. I don't believe that Harrison Bader is going to be a 118 WRC plus player the rest of the season. In fact, I anticipate regression from his bat going forward because of the expected statistics, a expected batting average of .225, an expected WOBA of .307. that usually is not a great sign for players going forward. However, and this is the thing with Harrison Bader, if you're getting him, it's not particularly for the offensive side of his game. It is for the following pieces that fall into place if you were to get the defensive upside that he has, and then you hope that he's able to continue with the groove that he's had all season. He is still putting up some pretty solid numbers on the season, 118 WRC plus. Defensively, combined between left and center field, which remember they have Byron Buxton out there in center field, he's put up a 5 outs above average, a 10 defensive runs saved, and he has some speed as well. I'm not saying that this is the greatest option because I don't know how much this would particularly improve the offense. But defensively, if your main concern is about making this defense as well-rounded as it possibly can, which remember, some of those small margins with the defense could be the difference between games, this could be an option that the Dodgers pursue, which makes me totally unsurprised that this is an option for the Dodgers to target. A couple of other under-the-radar pragmatic solutions that the Dodgers could target if your main concern is a little bit more on the hitting front. If your main concern is more offensive driven, a couple of other names. I've been on him for quite a bit, even dating back to the offseason this past year. Mike Tauchman could be an option, left-handed hitter. He actually technically does have 2 years of control, but was released after 4 years from, I don't remember which organization he was. I know he spent a lot of time in San Francisco. I don't remember if I think he was with Chicago, the Cubs, and they decided not to pick up his option. But 286 on the season, 370 on base percentage, 474 slugging percentage. That's a 137 WRC plus on the season. He's able to hit both against righties and lefties, at least WRC plus wise on the season. Hit for a decent amount of power, draws a lot of walks, does not chase a whole lot, and defensively has been right at around league average as a defender. Mike Tauchman has played center field in the past, but is primarily focused, especially this year, in right field. Could be an option to look at if you're looking for a guy that has hit really well this season, and the expected numbers remain relatively in line with some of the numbers he's put up. Obviously, the expected numbers down a little bit. You can look at his batting average, balls to play. There'll probably be a little bit of regression, but you're still dealing with an above average offensive player that right now sits towards the top of the White Sox lineup. I know that's not saying much, but he is at the top of the lineup for them. Another one that I've grown more and more as an option for the Dodgers is Ramon Laureano for Baltimore. He only has 1 year left, and he currently this season is hitting 275, 338 on base percentage, 514 slugging, so this would add a little bit more pop. 363 weighted on base average, so a 136 WRC plus. The expected numbers are even better for Ramon Laureano. He does actually this year a little bit of a reverse splits guy, hits pretty well against right-handed pitching on the season. Really good power that he's able to generate. And does not chase a whole lot of pitches. And if you're looking for perhaps a merging of both the offensive upside as well as the defensive upside, perhaps this could be a case. Now, this depends on whether you want to look at outs above average or defensive run saves, two measures for defensive value. We're not going to go into explaining the difference between the two. One measures outs, one measures runs saved. That might be a show that we do a little bit of a different time to explaining the difference. But one says that Ramon Laureano a little bit below league average. The other one says that Ramon Laureano has actually been really, really solid with 7 defensive runs saved on the season. And in the past, he has been graded out as a really solid contributor defensively, I should say. So he very well could be an option to take a look at. One option that I don't think will be available that would be interesting to me would have been a guy like an Austin Hayes. I don't think Cincinnati is selling. I don't think Boston is selling otherwise, particularly with his ability to hit left-handed pitching. Maybe a Rob Refsnyder. I don't think he's an option. I don't anticipate the Dodgers to go after a Taylor Ward. or any of these other potential options right here. And actually, we're going to cut back this over to me. The reason why I'm going and talking about guys that have 1 year control, or in Tauchman's case, 2 years of control, is I actually don't think the Dodgers want to limit themselves right now and get an outfielder that has several years control where there's a huge buy-in to that. For example, if they were to go out and spend big for a Steven Kwan or Jarren Duran, which there's been a lot of rumors about, that would lock their outfield in to being, for at least the next couple of seasons, being Teoscar Hernandez, Andy Pages, and one of those guys. If, and this is a big if the Dodgers wanted to go after perhaps somebody in the offseason, there's a big free agent, like a name by Kyle Tucker. If they wanted to do that, they perhaps want to leave some of their options open. Now, this is not saying that the Dodgers will want to pursue him in free agency, nor should that necessarily be the expectation with all of these moves. But if you get some other of these players that could lock you in a little bit or lock in some of the decisions that you make, especially if it becomes a little bit more difficult to be able to trade some of these guys. Just one thing to keep in mind, the Dodgers typically like to keep a lot of their different options open. And especially, I mean, you're talking about some of these guys, they're really talented players, and they could make the argument, and very well, I will make the argument later, that you could potentially move these guys that you trade for other trade pieces. If that is the case, my anticipation would be that it would probably be a short-term solution that has some upside, would be the view that the Dodgers are trying to go after and get when targeting some sort of outfielder. So it becomes a question. And these are really the three main options. There's a couple of other options I'm not as high on. Luis Robert Jr., I know he's been hitting well recently, but the overall season numbers are still not great for Luis Robert Jr. 76 WRC plus, only hitting 204 with not quite as much power on the season. I know he's had some good defensive ability out there. Have never really been as high on Luis Robert Jr. Cedric Mullins, I'm not as high. I'm really not high on him as well. Both of them would be defensive center fielders. Cedric Mullins has been about league average as a bat, 97 WRC plus. The tricky thing about him is if you look at his defense, if you look at defensive runs saved in center field, he's been a negative 17. Which is gotta be, I don't know the actual leaderboards, but that's gotta be towards the bottom in all of Major League Baseball. I don't anticipate that being the direction that the Dodgers would go after and pursue somebody like a Cedric Mullins, especially if there already is concern about the defense out there for the Dodgers. So if you're looking for a pure defender that could make a lot of the other situations work, perhaps the Dodgers pursue Harrison Bader. If they are looking for a bat more towards the bat that would probably play a little bit more corner outfield, perhaps you look at either a Mike Tauchman or a Ramon Laureano. Those would be kind of my readings on it. One player, and we'll get to him just a minute after read some more comments, which please comment down below, continue to interact here at Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network. One player that really is kind of fascinating, and we'll get into this conversation because this is actually a conversation I had a couple of days ago before this news started to break, and this will actually correlate really well with my relief pitcher talk, is Brendan Donovan. Utility type of player from St. Louis. He actually does have the ability to play the corner outfield as well, so he could potentially be a option if you're wanting to go down that route. So we'll go ahead and read a couple of comments right now. We'll go ahead and do that. Let's continue going on this. CNAP says, I bet Class A doesn't get traded. And Colossal Jaguar, I'd wager on that. Yeah, there are comments that are probably going to come up. CNAP, I'm not high on getting Bader. Just move Edmund to center field and Pages to left field. Very well could be an option. The question with that is, what exactly do you do with the second base position? Perhaps it's Kike Hernandez that you do. Perhaps you do a Kike Hernandez and a platoon with him and Hae-Sung Kim. that could be an option that could be in play for the Dodgers. As far as acquiring a second baseman, I haven't done as much research on that because I haven't viewed that as much of a need. But if the third base market is indicative of what you would anticipate from the second base market, perhaps that could be where things get a little bit tricky, unless the Dodgers went out and targeted somebody like a Brendan Donovan. tulsadrillers, Bader doesn't move the needle for me. If you're looking for the offensive side and looking at that, very much so, it doesn't move the needle for me. But if you're looking for the way things align defensively, perhaps that's something that they could do. And this is not something that has to fully happen. Just want to talk about a little bit of news right now, just because we got some updates. Fabian Odaya just tweeted it out. I do have notifications on just in case any sort of trade breaks. It sounds like tomorrow, Max Muncy is going to be starting a rehab assignment in Oklahoma City, which is absolutely great news for the Los Angeles Dodgers and what they could do going forward. Blake Snell also is expected to start this weekend in Tampa Bay. A couple of other updates from Fabian Odaya, which I'm just reading this right now for my first time reading it. Kike Hernandez isn't doing baseball activities, but is still expected back this season. A little bit concerning for Kike Hernandez. And then Tony Gonsolin isn't close to starting throwing, so we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't anticipate Tony Gonsolin, at least right now, being back until we start to hear a little bit more news, but that certainly is concerning for Tony Gonsolin. O'Donnell Boy, will Toronto prevail in the AL? We'll see how we handle a good offense in a couple of weeks at the homestand. Blue Jays are really, really good right now. We'll wait and see what happens with them. I don't dive into a lot of those teams quite as in depth. I know that Blue Jays are playing really well. We'll see if that continues going forward for them. Gregory, Dalton Rushing is on the trading block with a question mark right there. Yeah, so the Dalton Rushing conversation is fascinating for me on many different levels, because this was a guy that I believed and still very much actively believe in fully in the potential that Dalton Rushing has, because of the ability that I saw firsthand and because of the numerical evidence to support just how good he actually is. With Dalton Rushing, though, it has no doubt been a struggle getting him adapted to the major league level. And I will point out that this is the first time probably in his entire life that he's really not playing every single day or playing 5 days a week. In fact, he's only playing twice a week, and that's pretty much it. And so the question going forward is this Dalton Rushing's permanent role? And are the Dodgers wasting his future, wasting his talent, knowing that they have Will Smith behind the plate? They have Will Smith behind the plate for the next 8 years after this year, or at least that's a contract that he has signed. And in fact, they probably are wasting Dalton Rushing with the role that he has. Now, to be fair, Will Smith, with what he's been able to do this season, Dalton Rushing has provided a lot of support, and we're starting to see Will Smith be really, really good, which Will Smith is 170 WRC plus player. That's 70% above league average. He's been really, really good, I think in part because he's able to get additional rest. That certainly is very helpful for the Dodgers, having a player like a Dalton Rushing there to be able to do that. But Dalton Rushing, I believe in his potential being better than just a backup catcher permanently, which means that you have to try to find some additional playing time for him, which becomes incredibly complicated with a situation at first base and DH for the Dodgers. I think he is a perfect Dodger at a very inopportune time to be able to be added to the mix. Meaning that the three positions that you could realistically put him at and feel very comfortable at, and that includes designated hitter, first base, and catcher, all of which are blocked by potential or future Hall of Famers and somebody who could potentially grow into a future Hall of Famer in Will Smith. And so the question is, do any of those players add additional positional versatility to eventually get Dalton Rushing into the mix? Or are you going to have a very serious conversation about what to do with Dalton Rushing? And I think the organization, at the very least, is starting to have those conversations. They do not have to make a decision this trade deadline. which means they don't have to force doing that right now, because I don't think the difference between Dalton Rushing's value right now versus the offseason is going to be that different. But I think sometime between now and next offseason, they're going to have to make a decision and have more clarity about Dalton Rushing, because they can't waste the value of what Dalton Rushing provides. And right now, with him not playing, only playing twice a week, he's not getting the at-bats, he's not getting the playing time to be able to adapt to a major league player. And so trying to find some sort of way to maximize the growth, maximize potential, maximize the fight that Dalton Rushing has, while capitalizing on the value, while he still has an insane amount of value, is going to be incredibly tricky for the Dodgers. So that situation is so difficult because Rush is such a good dude, and he is going to, I believe, be a great catcher in Major League Baseball one day. The question is, will it ever be the case for the Los Angeles Dodgers? I don't know that right now, and neither do the Los Angeles Dodgers. Let's see, Colossal Jaguar talking a little bit about Dustin May. We'll see what happens with Dustin May. Obviously, there are some rumors that Dustin May could potentially be traded. I don't really know what to exactly think. And actually, what we're going to do right now, let's look at the roster situation. Because I think we have to keep this in mind. Let me go ahead and pull this up. This is courtesy of Fangraphs right now, and this is going to give us a little bit of a picture as far as bullpen options or just pitching options for the Dodgers. So this is Fangraphs. This is the roster resource that they have. You look at arms, then you got Yamamoto, Glasnow, Sheehan, Kershaw, and Ohtani as the starters. You can throw Dustin May in the mix. However, Blake Snell, as we heard from Fabian Ardaya, is going to be returning and pitching against the Rays, which very well could be potentially this Friday game or a Sunday game. I don't know, just based off of the projections that we are seeing right here. That would probably be my guess as far as when that would take place. But you would see Blake Snell enter in the mix, and then you have a 6-man rotation of Yamamoto, Glasnow, Sheehan, Kershaw, Ohtani, and Blake Snell. That is excellent as a rotation, and having it be a little bit more 6-man would be absolutely great. With the 6-man rotation, it's unique because Shohei Ohtani is part of that mix, but ideally you would have a guy with a little bit of length, which I think for the Dodgers comes to a question of what do they do potentially with a Justin Robleski or a Dustin May, because ideally, and this perhaps could just be me, and perhaps the organization thinks differently, but I would like to have a guy that can go probably 3 innings out of relief, or go out and face 8 to 9 batters at a time. I think those guys, with having a lot of different starting pitchers, would be probably the best thing to be able to do to try to help preserve the rest for the rest of the bullpen. If that is the case, perhaps you keep Dustin May as that piggyback type of starter or the long relief type of options. But as an actual starter, it's been a struggle for Dustin May overall on the season. We'll see if there's any interest in going ahead, and if the Dodgers actually make a trade, Dustin May is going to be a free agent after this year, which means that he's not going to cost a lot for other teams to be able to acquire him, but it could be the last time that the Dodgers have to capitalize on the value of Dustin May, especially if you want to add 2 different relievers to the mix. So let's actually do some of the math and look at all of these different options, and let's say they go ahead and acquire 2 relief pitchers. And this is without anybody returning healthy. This is without Tanner Scott returning from injury or any of the other relief options. That probably pushes a guy like an Alexis Diaz back to AAA, Oklahoma City. And then potentially, especially if the Dodgers decided to trade a Dustin May and they want to go out and get a relief pitcher, that could also push out a Dustin May, in which case you have 2 relief pitchers. Let's just say, and we'll make this argument in just a minute, let's just say they go get a package deal for a Ryan Helsley and Phil Maton from St. Louis, which would be phenomenal get for the Dodgers. Then you would have a
Ryan Helsley, you would have Blake Trinan, Alex Vesia, Ben Kasparius, Anthony Banda, Kirby Yates. Then you would have Ryan Helsley, Jack Dreyer, Justin Robleski, and Phil Maton be part of the bullpen. That could be a situation where they start to lose. They might not necessarily need a Dustin May, and this is a little bit of a gamble because last year the Dodgers thought they had enough starting pitching, and it turned out they did not have enough starting pitching. But it could be a gamble that they're willing to make, especially if they feel like all these guys, they would anticipate them being ready to go for the postseason. And remember, in the postseason type setting, you really only need 4 starting pitchers to be part of your mix. Or at least that's the situation that is typically pretty common, which ideally for the Dodgers' best case scenario would be Yamamoto, Glasnow, Blake Snell, and Shohei Ohtani. They do have a Clayton Kershaw that they could potentially throw in the mix, or an Emmett Sheehan who has shown really good signs to be able to throw in there. The question is, do you need Dustin May right now to be that 7th starter as insurance just in case they're dealing with injuries? Which, remember, this starting pitching staff has dealt with a lot of injuries in the past. So it's a risk assessment of what you anticipate your starters to be healthy, and whether or not the Dodgers as an organization feel like they are in a place where they want to throw Dustin May during the postseason. None of this is to say take anything away from what Dustin May has done this year. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and I'm sure Dustin May is a great human being, and it just comes from the business side of things. Difficult decisions that the Dodgers organization eventually has to make. I'm not fully convinced that they're going to trade Dustin May at this time. However, with the free agency of where he's at, it could be an option that they decide to pursue. And I hope Dustin May, whether he stays with the Dodgers or whether he goes with another organization, goes out there and shows just how good he is. He more than deserves all the opportunities that he's getting with everything that he's been through and with still some of the stuff that he's been able to showcase. We'll see what happens with Dustin May. Craig Osterberg packaged all the AAA players over 26 as trade bait or younger prospect or draft choices. They can't, I don't believe, trade their draft prospects right now. They have to wait until the offseason to trade any of those guys. So they're not going to make any sort of trade for any of the drafted guys that they have. And when you're talking about guys that are stuck at AAA, guys like a Ryan Ward, who more than deserves an opportunity at the major league level now with what he is doing in Oklahoma City, already with 94 RBIs and a ridiculous amount of home runs, probably is. I know he is towards the top and might be the top in all of minor league baseball in home runs. He is an outfielder in the Dodgers organization, very much deserves an opportunity. I just don't know with his age of where he's at, which this is in part why Josue DePaulo and Zaire Hope are seen as so valuable, and it's because they're so young. Ryan Ward is, I believe, 27 years old at this point. It's a question as far as how much you'd be able to get in return, especially because Ryan Ward is going to be a minor league baseball free agent at the end of the season if the Dodgers do not add him to a 40-man roster or any team adds him to the 40-man roster. There are some other players that are getting a little bit older as well. This is the risk that comes with holding on to a lot of guys. With the younger prospects, they are set up in a better situation because the Dodgers do not have the ability to keep all guys on their 40-man roster, which means you need some guys that aren't having to be added to the 40-man roster to be protected from the Rule 5 draft to flood your minor league system. That is the situation that the Dodgers have to deal with. So the younger prospects, I'm sure the organization knows that because that's the way that they've gone out and targeted guys. That was in part some of the moves that they've made in this past offseason with that in mind. But I just don't see that as being the primary focus, even though those are some of the players that a lot of other organizations are going to want. And actually, brings up a little bit of a good point. And I will go ahead and look at this right now. I wanted to bring this up talking about age relative success, because Casey and I actually had a good conversation about this on the show this past Wednesday, which if you had not had a chance to be able to watch that show, that's when we get into a really good debate.
I believe we should be having another show this upcoming Wednesday as well, so there should be more discussion as well. But we also talked about the relative success for players like a Zaire Hope and a Josue DePaula. And one of the points that I actually didn't talk about a whole lot, I really should have talked about this, is the relative age for Josue DePaula and a Zaire Hope with the level of success that they have. So I talked a lot about him having a lot of success in the Midwest League, which is a difficult league to hit in. Both of them have about a 140-ish WRC plus on the season, a little bit above for both of them, and 40% above league average as a hitter. Really, really, really good. The question is, are there potential holes in their game? And there's no doubt that there potentially could be holes in each one of those games. When you're talking about Josue DePaula, defensive home question mark in the future would probably be the top one. With Zaire Hope, perhaps there's a little bit of concern about swing and miss ability for him. But what I wanted to show you, and this is something to keep in mind with both of them, they're both, I believe, 20 years old. And what they are doing in the Midwest League is incredibly rare. And I'm going to show you just how rare it is. Now, granted, for the Midwest League, it was originally a low A league and then got transitioned to high A ball, meaning it moved up a level at the start of the 2021 season. So perhaps this is even a little bit unfair because this is including a lower level than what the league actually is right now. But I want to show you with some of the names that are on the list in comparison to what they have. So we're talking about the Midwest League, which is the league that both Josue DePaula and Zaire Hope are in right now. If you're talking about players 20 or younger that have at least a 135 WRC plus, which both Josue DePaula and Zaire Hope clear that mark on the season to this point. And we're talking about, I believe I set the mark at 200 plate appearances. So it's not a ridiculous sum of plate appearances. If you're talking about some of the names in the Midwest League since 2006, which is as far back as we can possibly go, the number of names that are on the mix, I don't know why there's an ad for the Washington Nationals right there, there's 76 players that have meet that criteria in the Midwest League that meet 20 or less and 135 WRC plus on the season. That is the name category that both Josue DePaula and Zaire Hope are currently in. You're talking about guys like Bo Bichette, Jose Porceño, who's currently going up the ranks, Byron Buxton, Javier Baez, Mike Trout was part of this mix. Ben Revere had a good career. Francisco Mejia went up through the system. Eloy Jimenez, Ellie De La Cruz is a good one, and actually had a much higher strikeout percentage than what a Zaire Hope has right now, at least by a couple points. Colton Wong, Corey Seager, Colt Keith, Miguel Vargas, Will Myers, Andy Pajes, Max Clark, Fernando Tatis Jr., Alec Thomas, Brett Phillips, Carlos Correa. You're talking about some really good names: Emmanuel Rodriguez, Miguel Sano, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Luis Arias, Jose Ramirez. There is a lot of really good names. Jesse Winker right there. Brandon Drury had a nice career. Now, Robert Hassel III. This is not to say that Josue DePaula and Zaire Hope won't be those type of players. Will be those players. There's no saying whether Josue DePaula or Zaire Hope are going to be those type of players or will continue to have the success. Prospects have a lot of variability in what they have to do. But the category of type of player that they have is really rare, especially with the relative production and their age. And this is apparent, and I don't mean to pick on the Padres organization, even though I'm sure the chat loves to pick on the Padres organization. They've had some young players and young prospects come up that are really young that go out there and have some success. For example, last year in the Midwest League, they had Ethan Salas. He was a young catching prospect that they decided to put in the Midwest League and struggled quite a bit. He's young in relative to his age, but they decided to rush him through his ability. He wasn't putting up the numbers that DePaula or Hope were putting up. Even this year, they have a player down in their system. I'm blanking on the name right now, and this is really tough because
The Loons are playing the Tin Caps this week, and DeVries, Leo DeVries, right down there. He's putting up really solid numbers, but it's more in the 116 to 120-ish, I believe, WRC plus. Don't exactly quote me on that. That might be a little bit outdated. But what Josue DePaula and Zaire Hope are doing relative to their age, the point that I'm trying to make is that it's really rare. And when you're dealing with things that are really rare, this is what you want to do in comparison to guys who might be a little bit older, where it still might be rare to put up good, solid numbers, but there might not be as much long-term high ceiling potential as there is for some of these other guys. And I think that's an important thing to be able to keep in mind for a DePaula and a Hope, which means that if you're going to trade one of those guys, it has to be for the right deal. And I'm not sure how much more. I'll continue to try to go through some of the chat. I do have to leave here in probably about 20-ish minutes or so. This actually brings up a little bit of a good conversation that I had with Jay on the YouTube chat. So in the video or in the comments of these videos, I try to, as best as I can, especially with the ones that I am in, go out and interact with some of the people that comment, especially if there's question marks that you have about it. But one of the things that Jay had mentioned, who comments quite a bit in the comment section, absolutely amazing with what he's able to do. And this goes to our conversation Casey and I had about going out and getting an elite reliever, going out and getting Yohan Duran, which Yohan Duran has been absolutely amazing this season for the Minnesota Twins. And Casey's point of what he has is Yohan Duran has been really good. The Los Angeles Dodgers, this is an absolute need for the Dodgers to go out and get an elite pitcher. And you're the Los Angeles Dodgers. If you see a relief pitcher, go out and get the very best relief pitcher. And especially with a Josue DePaula or a Zaire Hope, there potentially could be holes in their game, and there's question marks as far as whether they'd actually make it with the Los Angeles Dodgers. Why are you hesitating to go out and get that type of player? That is more or less, and Casey can probably flesh that out a little bit more, that's more or less the argument that he had. And I wanted to bring up something because I think it's a really good thought exercise for you guys to be able to do. This is in the comment section from the video, from the live stream we did last week. We'll go ahead and cut over to this comment that I have, and this was from 4 days ago. So this was before the rumors of Brendan Donovan took place. Basically, with this comment, my main concern is putting all of your baskets into one main relief pitcher, or using really significant prospect capital to go out and get some sort of just one relief pitcher. So what I had is put out two potential trades. Now, I want to be clear. Both of these trades could be something where the values are very much different from each other, and one team feels like they're getting ripped off, and I don't want this to be something where the names are identified, or I want to trade these guys. I don't want to trade any of these guys that are listed right here, but I wanted to create something that could be within the ballpark of real, which within the ballpark of real, meaning that there could be potentially a situation in which both teams see a lot of value in this. So I presented Jay with potentially a proposal. Perhaps the Dodgers do, let's say the Dodgers were to do one of two of these things. The Dodgers trade for Yohan Duran and Phil Maton. Both, if you look at the Excel spreadsheet, which is available, pinned in the description, you can see the numbers that they have. Phil Maton has been unbelievable for the St. Louis Cardinals. Yohan Duran is one of the best relief pitchers in the game of baseball and would be absolutely elite. To go out and get a Yohan Duran would likely cost at least one of your top guys. And in fact, there's reports that Minnesota might even want more. But perhaps, let's say that Minnesota is happy with a prospect package of either a Josue DePaula or a Dalton Rushing. We talked a little bit about Dalton Rushing situation. You could throw in a Zaire Hope in this conversation as well. One of those guys. And then a Justin Robleski and a Peter Hubeck. The reason why I mentioned Peter Hubeck and Justin Robleski, both of them, Justin Robleski will have only one minor league option after this season, which means that he's starting to run out of options, and especially if the long-term play of Justin Robleski isn't in the starting rotation. They got Roki Sasaki. They've got a whole bunch of different names in the starting rotation. Perhaps you capitalize now on the value, especially since he's pitched well at the major league level. And then Peter Hubeck, the only reason that why I identify him is because he's Rule 5 eligible after this season, and it's very likely that teams are going to take a very serious look at a guy like a Peter Hubeck. Let's say that is the package to go out and get a Yohan Duran and Phil Maton. What I want you to do is compare that to something that could potentially be a comparable package. Let's say the Dodgers went out and traded for Brendan Donovan, Ryan Helsley, and Phil Maton. And let's say the starting point, which there probably would be more that potentially could be added, is, for example, a Josue DePaula, Dalton Rushing, a Justin Robleski, and a Gavin Stone. I'm not saying that that's the deal that would get accepted, but I'm saying that's within the relative ballpark of ideas that could potentially be valued for a team like St. Louis. You would be getting a starting caliber player or in a Dalton Rushing, or a player that is one of the top prospects within the Dodgers organization, and two potential guys that could be in the St. Louis starting rotation that are MLB ready for the next 4 or 5 years, especially with the price point of starting pitching. That's really expensive to have those guys. Let's say that you're presented with those two options of what the Dodgers could potentially do. My argument actually has little to do with Brendan Donovan in this situation, which with Brendan Donovan, you could have a lot of different fit ideas what he could have. He's a close to 300 hitter, has had a 122 WRC plus, a lot of success, and a lot of versatility that seems to fit within the mold that the Dodgers have. They could either fit him at second base or one of the corner outfield spots. What this is intended to do is redirect the mind as to how much do you actually value each one of these players. And you could say that as perhaps is not a fair evaluation for Brendan Donovan. The Cardinals potentially might want more. But what my point with acquiring this is not entirely based off Brendan Donovan specific, but rather talk about the comparable price to go out and acquire either a Yohan Duran or a Mason Miller or a Griffin Jack. So I'll go ahead and read some of this. Very good thoughts. It goes towards my point. You're entirely right that the second proposal trade and its price is entirely driven by the cost of acquiring a guy like Brendan Donovan, meaning that for both of the trades, Yohan Duran is the centerpiece. For the second one, Brendan Donovan is the centerpiece. Both of these would require some type of Josue DePaula, Dalton Rushing-like piece. And what my point is, both Ryan Helsley and Phil Maton could be acquired for significantly cheaper, meaning that the point wasn't necessarily the Dodgers need or should acquire Brandon Donovan. Rather, the two prospect packages use a top guy from the Dodgers. One requires two relievers, while the other one requires two relievers and an everyday bat. The main point I would try to make is that if the Dodgers were to trade a DePaula, a Hope, a Rushing, etc., I think it is better to spread out those resources and eggs into a bat rather than putting all of your resources into a reliever. And we've seen that risk pop up with Emmanuel Clase today. Let's say that the Dodgers had a couple days ago made a trade, one of their top guys for an Emmanuel Clase. That would look like an awful situation for the Dodgers, and they would utilize some of their prospect capital for that. Now, that's an extraordinarily rare case, but something that's a lot less extraordinary, especially with you're dealing with guys that throw incredibly hard, that have a lot of stuff, there's a lot of injury risk. And putting all of your eggs, especially all of your prospect capital, into one individualized guy might not be the wise thing to do. And we're talking about Phil Maton, we're talking about Ryan Helsley. That would not require a top-line prospect for the Dodgers to trade in order to acquire them, which means you have to take a marginal assessment of each one of the relievers. How much marginally better is a Yohan Duran in comparison to a Ryan Helsley, if you want to make a comparison of that? And if we go back, let's go back to the spreadsheet right now, because we'll talk about Ryan Helsley. He seems to be the name that is appearing quite a bit. Again, the spreadsheet you can go ahead and access with the link in the chat that is pinned to the top. If we look at Ryan Helsley's numbers on the season, which are some of the worst numbers that he's put up in the past couple of seasons, his career numbers are even better. 3.3 ERA. In comparison to Yohan Duran, he's got a 1.86. The underlying numbers are a little bit closer to the mid twos is kind of where I would put the average of all of these numbers. This 2.45 averages all of these different estimates. If we're looking at strikeout percentage, Yohan Duran is about 26%. That is right where Ryan Helsley is. We're talking about fastball velo. He's got 99. Yohan Duran's got about 100. If we're looking at quality of contact, you're looking at pretty solid stuff right there. Ryan Helsley, a little bit worse on the season right there. There could potentially be some other options. Phil Maton would be significantly cheaper than a Ryan Helsley. That his quality of contact, a 2.260 expected ROBA, is right in line with Yohan Duran on the season, and he has a higher strikeout percentage on the season. Not saying that he's the better pitcher, but he would be a significantly cheaper option with a 2.35 ERA that the Dodgers could target. David Bednar would be cheaper than a Yohan Duran, Griffin Jax, or Mason Miller, and he's put up a 2.19 ERA and has closed a lot of games for the Pittsburgh Pirates. You could go to a Seranthony Dominguez, who profile-wise fits really well. You could bet on potentially some of the upside with a Raisel Iglesias, who would cost extraordinarily cheap, but could potentially be a recreation project that the Dodgers could have. And his Sierra is at 3.0. Strikeouts are still pretty solid for him. Gets a lot of called strikes and swinging strikes on the season for him. You could go out and get a Danny Coulomb. 1.16 ERA in the season. One comment that was mentioned that I didn't have on the list previously, Jojo Romero. 2 years control, but hey, he's having a really good season. The point that I'm trying to make with this is if you were to trade your top line guys, meaning the guys that are part of your system, that you don't even have to add to the 40-man roster for a little bit, that are going to be part of this organization and potentially could have a future within the organization as a future in the outfield. You don't have to make that move for what the immediate need is right now, especially if the need right now is for relief pitching. Comparably, there are potentially alternative options that the Dodgers could turn to. And when you're talking about the marginal difference between the top guy and the next tier, the question is, with the volatility of relievers, which remember, relief pitching is the most volatile market to go to, it typically is not something that the Dodgers have invested significant cost or financial resources. And we've seen that backfire a little bit for the Dodgers this year with some of the success that Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates have had. And meaning that they have not been as good players as they had been previously. And there could be potentially reason to believe that it could be the exact same case, and then you put all of your prospect capital that would limit your ability to make additional moves in the future into a relief pitcher that you could have had a potentially as good or very good option I will have for a significantly cheaper rate. These are difficult conversations to have, but it's not just go out and get the top line. It is go out and find the best fit for the Los Angeles Dodgers, what's going to be the best price point. And if you find a player that has a good fit that would match with the situation well, perhaps that could be good. Which, for the conversation that we had with Brendan Donovan, perhaps the trade proposal that I have is unrealistic, or perhaps it is within kind of the realm. I would be much more inclined to go with that type of trade proposal as opposed to putting all your eggs in one basket to go get a reliever. I would much rather go out and get a position player, perhaps comes with a couple of different relievers, if the Dodgers were going to go ahead and trade one of their top guys, talking about a Josue de Paula, Zaire Hope, or a Dalton Rushing. Those are just my thoughts, though. Be curious to hear what you guys have to hear. We're going to roll through a couple of comments. St. Louis split the series with San Diego 2-2. Thank you for that. I'm going to roll through these as quickly as possibly can because I only have a couple more minutes left. Please hit the like button. Absolutely. Keith Potter, thank you very much for joining us. Chapman left yesterday's game. Luis Robert Jr. got hit in the forearm. Looks okay. And Bautista's on the IL with shoulder discomfort. All were linked to the Dodgers. Yes, means that injuries happen quite a bit, which means, and this was the question that I had with Casey, and let me clarify this. When I'm talking about quantity, that doesn't necessarily mean that I just want a bunch of guys just to get a bunch of guys, and because I'm unwilling to go out and trade prospects. What I'm saying with that is I'm actually concerned about some of the pitchers that are on the Dodgers roster, particularly in the bullpen, and the future health that they could have, either because they've dealt with some injuries, currently are dealing with some injuries, or getting up to some of the potential innings limits that they have dealt with in the past. So getting a lot of quality guys, getting quantity and quality, I think is something that's going to be really important for the Dodgers. And this is why teams typically wait towards the end of the July 31st trade deadline, is because they don't want to make an immediate investment and then deal with some injuries that get dealt with. Let's see. Gibson 88, is Kopech coming back? I believe so, although until players, especially that are on the injured list, start throwing rehab outings, and this could be just because we've all seen a lot of things happen with the Dodgers. It could be very much a question mark as far as whether you trust the health records that the Dodgers put out, because the Dodgers have just dealt with a lot of different injuries. I'm certain that they're not trying to lie with any of the injuries updates that they have, but I just wait to see for that. Wait to see when players are coming back. But I believe Kopech should be coming back at some point, which could be another option. CNAV, we've got a lot of lefties in the bullpen right now. Maytag, Banda, Vesia, and Robo. There is a lot of lefties. Vesia is the main one, the main contributor within that group. Maytag has been absolutely amazing. He's the one that I'm a little bit more concerned with, because at this point of the season, he is at 91% of the innings he pitched last year. So there could be a little bit of some questions that you could potentially have about him going forward. Just reading on some trade rumors. It looks like Danny Jansen's in Tampa Bay. Is the update that I got. Let's see. Continuing on with a couple of these. Keith Potter, I still want Luis Robert Jr. Totally okay to have that. Just have a little bit of a different view on that. CNAV, Conforto is still under the Mendoza line. Let's see. Continuing on this. Ruben Tamaya, it would be nice to have Joe Kelly back for the Padres series coming up next month. Could potentially be, especially because of the fight that Joe Kelly has. However, it has to be Joe Kelly. If you were to acquire Joe Kelly, it can't be because he's a name that is familiar to Dodgers fans or to the Dodgers organization. It has to be because you believe that Joe Kelly is going to go out there and have a lot of success. Which last year, Joe Kelly, with his expected ERA in the 5s and ERA 4.7, I believe, there could be a little bit of question marks that you could have. But if he goes out there, showcases really well for the Dodgers, and especially if they're needing additional pitching, he could be an option that the Dodgers turn to. I'm not putting all of my hopes up there currently at the moment. CNAV, I'm a no on Luis Robert Jr. Just bring up the 311 average, 28 home run, 94 RBI, 1,000 OPS, 12 stolen base, Ryan Ward from Oklahoma City. I don't necessarily disagree with that take. Gibson A, I like to see Ward get 50 at-bats. Ryan Ward has been absolutely phenomenal. I just hope that he gets an opportunity at some point coming up pretty soon. Let's see, Gibson 88. I'm not sure if any team will take May. We'll have to see. The question that you have to keep in mind is, if you are convinced that Dustin May is not and should not be part of your playoff rotation for the Dodgers based on the results that you have seen thus far this year, which you can certainly have that opinion. What is the other team's evaluation of Dustin May? Do they see him as an option for the postseason? And that's going to dictate whether the Dodgers are able to trade him or get anything significant in return for him. Keith Pollard, Kim is a shortstop, younger, faster, stronger arm. They need to flip-flop Kim and Betts. Could be an option at some point. Right now, they seem pretty happy with Mookie Betts at the shortstop position. Let's see. Continuing on, Gibson, Betts in right, Paje center, Hernandez in left. I don't anticipate Mookie Betts going back into the outfield. Mookie Betts, his athleticism has dropped off a little bit. He's not as fast as he used to be. I know he could still play
right field if the organization decided that that was the case. But then who are you putting at the shortstop position? If the answer is Tommy Edman, okay, who's you putting at the second base position? Is it Hae-Sung Kim? Which both of those players, Tommy Edman and Hae-Sung Kim, have been struggling quite a bit as of late. I know Hae-Sung Kim's overall season numbers are really good, but recently, if you're talking about the past month and a half or so, it hasn't been quite as good for Hae-Sung Kim, and there could be some back and forth that he has to have to get adjusted to some of the big league pitching. Let's see. Continuing on with some of this. CNAV, I think Pages is improving in center field. He's robbed some home runs out there. Routes seem to be better too. I absolutely believe. Showtime LA. Hey, Austin, sucks to see DePaula and Sirota both on the IL. They're having phenomenal seasons. Sirota is on the IL. I didn't see, I'll take your word, Josue DePaula, who got taken out of the game on Wednesday, didn't appear the rest of the week. I didn't see the immediate transaction with him getting placed on the IL. He was in the dugout with Great Lakes, I believe, just about all the week. I was there on Thursday and Friday. He was walking around, but it could be something that they're keeping him. Yeah, it looks like he just got added to the injured list just on Saturday. It looks like is what they have for him. He's just on the 7-day injured list, which is different from what Mike Sirota is on the 68-day injured list. So we'll wait and see what happens going forward with Josue DePaula. Let's see. Continuing on with these. Tony Jose Ramirez should be available now. I don't think Jose Ramirez is going to be available just because Cleveland might be falling out of the race this year. With Jose Ramirez, he is arguably the best, and perhaps it's not even arguably, the best third baseman in all the game of baseball. And when you have him under a pretty team-friendly deal, especially if you have hopes to be able to continue to go out there and be successful going forward, I'm not anticipating Cleveland going out there and wanting to trade him in any sort of way. He would be a major upgrade. He would be absolutely phenomenal, but I don't anticipate him being traded. Just my opinion, though, could be something where you have a little bit of a difference in opinion. Let's see. Question from Keith Potter. If the Dodgers get Bader or Donovan, what position player gets DFA'd? The roster situation we can take a look at a little bit later. If you're talking about names that would potentially get moved down, if they get a Harrison Bader, that's a replacement for a guy like a James Outman. If you don't believe in the bat right now for James Outman, especially with the playing time that he's getting, could be the exact same thing for a Brendan Donovan, or it could be a replacement for Nestor Ruiz. I think both of them probably get sent down once Max Muncy returns, and if they acquire an additional bat, those will be to the two moves. The question becomes what happens with a Kike Hernandez. If Kike Hernandez returns this season, in which they are still anticipating him returning at some point, you could throw him, you could have a conversation about what needs to happen from there. Could he, if Hae-Sung Kim continues to struggle, he'd be one of the few guys that could potentially be optioned down. That could be a path that they go down. Or if players dealing with injury, perhaps that's additional assurance Kike Hernandez is if they are dealing with an injury. Kopech, Phillips, Gratterell are definitely missing the pens in CNAV. Yeah, they absolutely are, which means that the Dodgers probably are going to have to go out and get a relief pitcher, which is something that they did not really want to do at the start of the season. Keith Potter, none of the trade deadline potential deals would move me to trade Hope or DePaula. Let's see, continuing on right here, almost time for Dodgers baseball. That's right, Dodgers baseball is about to start in just a couple of minutes. And let's see, legend of, I don't know how to say the last one, so I won't even try. What about a deal for Hesley and Nootbaar? I feel like that could be easier done than getting Donovan. The thing about Lars Nootbaar, which he is, I've been a fan of Lars Nootbaar. He's been around league average bat this season. He's currently injured right now, which could complicate things a little bit. And he's got 3 years of control, exact same as a Brendan Donovan. Not quite as good offensively this year. There's some expected numbers that really like a Lars Nootbaar. The difficulty with him is you would, if you make that move, lock into place your outfield situation for the next couple of years. So if you wanted to go out and potentially pursue say you wanted to go out and try to get a Kyle Tucker,
you perhaps have locked in your outfield of Newtbar, Pages, and Teoscar. Not saying that that's not a bad thing to go out and do that. It would definitely be a little bit more cost effective to do that. But if you want to go out and get the top guy, perhaps that's not something that you do at this point. And I think Brendan Donovan's versatility, even if it's redundant at second base and potentially some of the corner outfield spots, could be something that they could do. And I think with Brendan Donovan, if you were to trade for him, perhaps it's at least right now you could get a little bit of return on that investment. I see with Brendan Donovan, and this is going completely against what I just said. If you have a little bit too much redundancy at that position, and you want to make some sort of trade, you don't need Brendan Donovan. You can get back some of the prospect capital that you trade away during the offseason if that's the case. CNAB, I wouldn't mind reacquiring Shelby Miller. Could be had, but Shelby Miller, I believe, is injured right now, so I don't know what exactly is going on with him. Let's see. A couple more comments right here. Keith Potter, I think moving May, if not traded, Sheehan and Kirsch in the bullpen would be better than trading our top prospects for just okay relievers. Yes. But there are some relievers that have been really, really good. And is the thing, do you believe that Dustin May is going to put up a 2 or 3 ERA in the bullpen? Or do you believe that he's going to be able to generate a 30% strikeout percentage? Some of those guys are available right now, and that's why you would want to potentially go out there and get additional relief pitching. And then Tark the Shark says Wróblewski can piggyback or middle relief too. Very well could. Absolutely could, and could be incredibly valuable with what he has put right there. So just to recap a couple of things with the show. 1, trade deadline is coming up, and I don't believe that there has been any moves that the Dodgers have made at this point. The Dodgers haven't made any trades quite yet, and there's still a question mark as far as what sort of moves that they will make. The need to go out there and get star power, or as far as star power for star power's sake, I don't think is the only option that the Dodgers could go down. There are many different alternative paths that the Dodgers could turn to, whether you're talking about the bullpen option, which very much, I think I'm very much in agreement with Casey. I think they need at least one relief pitcher, and I would probably feel a lot more comfortable if they got 2 quality options out of the bullpen. Do I think they get 2? Probably not. I think they probably get 1. But I would feel a lot more comfortable if they got 2 relief pitchers. And then when we're talking about an outfielder, most likely being another option, I'd feel a lot comfortable if they were to do that. Whether they go to defensive option or they go for a little bit more offensive upside within those options. There are players that are out there that are potentially available for the Dodgers to go out and get. It probably isn't going to be the flashiest deadline for the Los Angeles Dodgers, but this is a big time for the Dodgers to go out and put all the pieces together to try to make this team as well-rounded as possible. Last trade deadline, when they went out and got a Michael Kopech and they got a Tommy Edman, those weren't that wasn't the flashiest move to be made at the trade deadline, but that proved instrumental for the Dodgers going out there and winning the World Series. And I think they have the opportunity to be able to make some instrumental moves that perhaps could be the difference in making this team a really, really good club that can make it into potentially a World Series winner with the Los Angeles. They already have an insane amount of talent. If they just roll with what they have right now, I'd be all in on this team. But I think there could be potentially opportunities to make this team even that much better, and it's going to be fascinating to be able to watch this going forward. Just to let you know about the schedule, I believe Casey and I are going to try to find some sort of time on Wednesday, either before the game or after the game on Wednesday, to go ahead and continue to discuss trade deadline. If it's after the game, I probably can do only about half an hour or so. So we'll go ahead and do that. Tomorrow, I don't believe I'll be able to do a show unless there is some sort of trade, in which case I will do my very best to fit it in with the schedule that I have. Thursday, I will be driving down, which is the trade deadline day. I'll be driving down to Fort Wayne, go watch the Loons, who are red hot right now. Currently in position, if the season were to end today, to make the playoffs. They can continue that role in a massive series against the Fort Wayne Tin Caps. I'll be driving down for those games at least Thursday and Friday this week. But if any sort of news breaks, I'm sure Casey will try to call me in. It might be me driving on the road and me just with the phone call talking to Casey with the trade deadline. Could be a little bit weird with how that setup is right now. But it's a fun time to be a fan of the game of baseball, and it is always a fun time to be a fan of the Los Angeles Dodgers, and you guys are the absolute best. Very much appreciate that. I believe Casey should have another show that he's going to be able to do tomorrow. I don't necessarily quote me on that. At the very least, we should be having a show for you guys on Wednesday. Continue to go back here. Dodgers Dawgs, part of the Dodgers Daily Network, and we will love to continue to have these conversations with you guys. Until next time, though, thank you for tuning in, and go Dodgers.